My nightmares are none of your business.
Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the War Doctor story, The Innocent, written by Nicholas Briggs. Now, a bit of behind the scenes. Originally, when Doctor Who came back in 2009, the story that introduced the newest Doctor, Christopher Eccleston, wasn't a regeneration story, leaving a gap between Paul McGann and Christopher Eccleston, with many fans presuming that the regeneration happened during this time war that was being mentioned throughout the revived series. Many people believed that Paul McGann would regenerate straight into Christopher Eccleston and would have been a massive thing for people to really beg and see. And it's one of those things that, as fans, it's something that we really wanted to see, but never thought we would actually get, in a way. For you see, in 2013, Doctor Who was celebrating its 50th anniversary. And one of the things Stephen Moffat, showrunner at the time, did was introduce a new incarnation of the Doctor. A incarnation that actually sits in between the Paul McGann and Christopher Eccleston. Let me introduce you to Sir John Hurt, one of the biggest actors in British history. He's been doing so much, and he is well known for not only his bombastic, epic voice, but also being the guy who, in the Guinness Books of Records, has had the most death scenes. Most notably, he's known for I, Claudius, Crimes and Punishment. He's played the villain in 1984. He's played one of the crew members in Alien who gets his stomach stuck out like that. And he's also appeared in tons and tons of stuff. Ironically, one of them being a film called Frankenstein Unbound, where he plays a time-travelling space adventurer who goes back in time and meets Mary Shelley. That sounds familiar. That's really bizarre. But anyway, due to the events of the short story Night of the Doctor, which we've tackled, Paul McGann now regenerates into John Hurt's Doctor. John Hurt being the shortest run time in terms of his era. He doesn't have an era. He was retroactively introduced in the 11th Doctor era during Name of the Doctor, and then having a full-on appearance in Day of the Doctor, sharing the screen with the 11th and 10th Doctors, and in the climax of that story, the thing. So he never caught an era, in a sense, taking over Paul McGann as the shortest-lived Doctor on screen. He was also the oldest actor to ever play the role, the age of 73, I believe. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, and Big Finish decided that this needs to change. John Hurt is one of the greatest actors to have ever lived, playing one of the most iconic British characters in both British fiction and in sci-fi history. He should have his own stories. And so Big Finish actually got famed actor John Hurt to reprise his role in 4 box sets before he sadly passed away of cancer in 2017. So this is actually the first story of the run, and it acts as a sort of introduction story in a similar sense to Rose, in which this is a doctor who has already had a career in fighting monsters and saving the day, but opens as a gateway for our viewing audience to get introduced to this doctor and meet them at a particular moment in life, which could easily be a gateway into the series. Now, before I begin, I just want to state that John Hurt is actually one of my favourite doctors, despite him not having his own televised run. And I think, and there's something you've got to keep in mind, if you go into these stories wanting to see the war aspect of the war doctor, the warrior, a doctor that acts very undoctorly, a doctor which would let people get into harm's way just so he can win a fight, you're gonna be disappointed. This isn't the doctor that's represented here. If you wanted to see John Hurt, that guy with that epic voice and that great acting performance, he's been credited by many actors as the greatest actor of all time. If you want to hear him as the Doctor, just not going by the name of the Doctor, then this is the run for you. But yeah, John Hurt is one of my favourite incarnations, and hopefully during the course of these videos of his audio run on Big Finish, you will probably understand why, because I just really love these adventures. But anyway, on to the covers. Here's the official Big Finish CD cover, which is really nice. I believe it's a Rob Webster artwork with the new companion on the cover. Then there's this really cool lightning storm and this boat and there's ships like that. Now this comes in a box set, the Only the Monstrous, the first box set in the War Doctor. What's a trilogy, but instead of 3 it's 4? Quadrology, I think. I'm not quite sure. Got a nice stunning image of the Dalek there. This is technically, from our point of view, the introduction to the 2005 Bronze Daleks. Actually, I tell a lie. They don't actually appear in The Innocent. And like always, I make my own Big Finish. I make my own DVD covers. Now this one I'm especially proud of because I put this all by myself. I've taken the image from the trailer because it's in this landscape format and there's nothing, no bars or anything, so I got a nice clear image. And I don't know if you can tell, but the companion's head is poking out of the shot, so it's leaking out there. It looks really cool in my opinion. And as well, I don't know if it's coming I don't think it's coming clear on the screen, but I put like a pinkish glow representing the lightning on the board as well, so that looks really nice. There's the John Hurt, yes. That voice is the Doctor. I am not the Doctor. Stop calling me that. Here is the spine, if anyone's interested. And here's the back. Pretty neat stuff. So, on to the adventure at hand. So the story starts with a pre-credit sequence in which we see a scene with these two Time Lords on a secret mission, but they appear to have been saved by the man that was once known as the Doctor. And this Time Lord's General, Olistria, I believe her name is, she gets news that the Doctor is dead, leading into our intro with the new War Doctor, Doctor Who theme song. And this theme song is bloody fantastic. It's got this epic like da-da-da-dun, sting to it, and it's very, it feels like a Doctor Who story set during a war, as this story is of course set during the Time War. Now, in the actual adventure itself, the Doctor has just saved these two characters from a Time Lord experiment to try and save the war, or at least put the Daleks far back in technology standpoints that the war would be over. So basically giving the Time Lords an upper hand. But the Doctor has actually saved them because, despite them claiming that they were chosen, the Doctor proclaims it's like, no, you weren't chosen. You were picked without your choice, without your free will, to basically be sacrificed to the device that the Time Lords have stolen from the Daleks. It's the Dalek Time Destructor from the Dalek Master Plan. A nice little callback to that adventure. And what's really great is that this reference is never in your face. It's just a nice little detail that's in there. Cool for fans, but it's not like a necessary. You don't need to watch the Dalek Master Plan to understand this story. And obviously the Doctor's ship in the ship crashes and is presumed dead, but he lands on this planet. I believe it's called Drak Keska, where he befriends. Where he falls unconscious before being helped, nursed to health by this girl. Now, the main focus of the story is the relationship between the Doctor, I'm just going to call him the Doctor for simplicity's sakes, the Doctor and this character named Rejoice. Now, this relationship is very, very well handled from looking at an audience perspective on trying to get a grip on the War Doctor, as she asks the certain questions that brings out the better emotions of the War Doctor in a way that doesn't feel forced or unnatural. She asks him like what his name is, and he starts like, "I'm no one. Stop asking me my name." And originally they get off on a bumpy start as she's asking all these questions, and the Doctor's originally like not answering. But from an aspect of this character, Rejoice, she's played by, I can't remember, his name is like Lucy Briggs Watts or something like that. Let's see. Lucy Briggs Owen. And she does a pretty good job in terms of performances. She has a very almost unsettling sweetness to her voice. But I must be honest, I found the character extremely dull in terms of, like, there's nothing really of her that stands out. She could literally be replaced with any other character. And she basically in this story acts as the War Doctor's companion. And she's asking all these questions, and she introduces the Doctor to her world and the backstory behind it. And there's just nothing really there to talk to. Something about the character doesn't work, in my opinion. It's just too simple. She's just too simple in terms, and she doesn't feel much like a character. She feels like a plot point for our story. But it does help, in a way, on focusing on the War Doctor. As, like I said, the questions she asks and her dialogue with the War Doctor doesn't feel forced, but allows the dramatic vocal point of the War Doctor to be focused on, as the Doctor at this point is very weak, and so he has to kind of rely on her to get him better. At the start of the story, the Doctor tries to get to his TARDIS. She proclaims that there is a war going on, but she actually has no idea what a Dalek is. She's not talking about the Time War. She's talking about the war between her people and another race. I can't remember what they're called. Okay, again, it doesn't say on the back. These summaries on the back are really unhelpful, Big Finish. She's basically in her own little war, but her and her species will not fight. They would run away constantly, and this battle and this planet is basically their last chance for a home. They've taken all their energies to get to make this city on this planet, so they are left with two choices: A, to finally fight, or B, to surrender and just give up. And Rejoice, and seeing that the Doctor uses a TARDIS and is part of a much bigger galactic war, thought that she can get him to help. There's a great scene in which she's talking to her father about how she was hoping to persuade the Doctor to help her, but her and the father are like, we can't force him. If he wants to leave, it's got to be by his. If he wants to stay, it's got to be by his own choice. We can't force him to stay. If he wants to leave, his war is obviously another war that needs to take his priority. But the Doctor overhears this and he starts getting involved in this war as he helps Rejoice get to the capital of this city and help them out. Now, that's all great and set up, and this is a really great introduction, like I said, to the War Doctor, but there are some issues, especially when it comes to pacing, because what I forgot to mention is that every few often the Doctor will start passing out, and what will happen then is that we'll be really getting into the conversation as this Doctor is slowly revealing that he his philosophy on war is like, this is not something that you debate upon and have your own morals on. War is just something you do and stuff, and it's really great hearing the War Doctor basically summarizes war, is trying to explain to a unrelated character what this war means to him and why he has to fight it. But every few often he'll suddenly go, oh no, I'm passing out again, basically, and will collapse, black out, and here, in terms of the audio production, we get flashbacks of the Doctor saving the two characters from the Dalek time destructor device on their suicide mission ship. And this really breaks the flow of the adventure, because we have this start, stop, start, stop, start, stop, start, stop flow to the story, which is really distracting in a way. It helps in a way that we get into the mind of the War Doctor, and more performances from John Hurt is just a delight to hear, but it's still, in terms of if you're trying to get into the narrative, purely on the narrative, it really hurts the adventure in my opinion. Another strange aspect of this story, basically after they get to the capital, the Doctor is like, right, I can save your people, I can help save your people, but I need you to take me to your satellite system. And so Joyce's father goes and takes the Doctor to the satellite systems, where he alters the technology, and by pressing this button, the Doctor proclaims it will save everyone. And the Doctor collapses, has another one of his nightmares. But when he wakes up, he actually decides not to press the button. Or at least not him anyway. He gives the choice to Rejoice's father. Personally, I would have had it so that he gave the choice to Rejoice, just giving her a little bit more part of the adventure. But her father still works in terms of the story. And he is like, no, we put this to a vote. We put everything to a vote. This is a very big decision. We need to vote. And the doctor's like, I can't press that button for you. These are your people. These are people under your supervision. You got to press the button, and the time you have your meeting, you're going to be dead. So it's up to you. Suddenly, someone presses the button. It's Rejoice. She goes against her father's wishes and presses the button. And what this does is that it turns off all communications on the planet. However, now the satellites have been transformed into a shield projection thing around the planets, and now the planet is protected by a force field, stopping these invaders from bombs from getting onto the planet, saving everyone. And that's the end of half the adventure. Huh? That seems like something that should be completed the whole of the story. But no, that's actually half the story is done. Narrative-wise, there's nothing really to add on later on. But the story still has an extra 30 minutes left to tell. What can it say, really? Essentially, the doctor makes a promise, he asks that he be left alone whilst he's recovering. Rejoice meets, it's been described that Rejoice meets him ever so often in this place, and we get some really great scenes in which it starts off with the war doctor being really grumpy towards her for not leaving her alone. But she kind of gets this feeling that he actually likes the company and doesn't want to be alone. And she's curious about him. And they actually offer to go on a boat trip together, to which they do. However, somebody actually tracks the doctor down. A Time Lord. I can't remember her name. Ventry or something like that. Venclin. Who is actually a general of Alistria's army, who proclaims that she's found the doctor's not dead. This is where Rejoice learns about the name of the doctor, and John Hurt is like, don't call me that! And every time somebody mentions the doctor's name, John Hurt's, this is probably like a weak element of John Hurt's performance, sadly. Or at least, maybe it's the script or the direction, not really John Hurt. But every time somebody says doctor, John Hurt replies in the exact same way all the time. And it's a bit humorous in my opinion, where he goes, stop calling me that! Stop it! Stop calling me the doctor! I am not the doctor! It almost feels like they've taken the same clip and just repeated it every time they needed to. Very strange. Basically, this character's come down to ask the doctor to come back to Gallifrey. Alistria is in dire need, and the doctor proclaims that the Dalek time-destructed device would have weakened the Dalek's forces so that they are miles behind the Time Lords, and the war will hopefully be over very soon. So I'm going to go on this boat trip, and there's nothing you can say which will change my mind. And so him and Rejoice go on the boat trip. And then we get probably one of the most interesting scenes with the War Doctor so far. He goes on this boat, and Rejoice basically asks him why doesn't he use the name of the Doctor, why has he abandoned his name. She also asks us, like, you're still planning on going back on the war. Why? If you don't want to fight in this war, you want to stay here, stay here. And this is probably one of the most interesting elements of the War Doctor. He hates himself for participating in the war. Remember, the 8th Doctor gave up the name when he regenerated of the Doctor, so that the warrior, an incarnation specifically made to fight in the Time War, could be born. And so this Doctor has to fight in the war until the very end. It's his purpose, it's his mode of being. And that's how he explains. And he explains that, like the title of the box set, that he is a monster. And Rejoice is like, you're not a monster. She's trying to calm him down. And it's like, you're a good man. You saved our people. And you basically got nothing for it. You're not a bad man. You're a good person. And John Hurt starts like, kind of funny when you're a midget, but the scene takes itself really seriously, in which the Doctor basically just rows like, makes the boat like topsy-turvy like, and is like, look at me, I'm a monster now, aren't I? And it gets to the point where Rejoice actually falls off the boat, and we get a really sad, sweet end scene in which Rejoice tries to swim to shore, and the Doctor's like, no, you come back, please, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, she's like, no, don't worry, it's okay, I understand, you just need some time. If you need some help, just wave your bow around and I'll come for you, but I think you need some time alone. But don't worry, don't panic, it's fine. Honestly, I understand completely, I was overstepping my boundaries. However, something happens, a time storm arises, and the Doctor has to then rescue Rejoice and take her onto the TARDIS, because the Time Lords are trying to pick up the Doctor in his timeline to try and get into Gallifrey, and he actually escapes, he actually gets away at one point, and is free and is glad to see Rejoice in the TARDIS with him, until all of a sudden the Time Lords use energy from the original Eye of Harmony, one of the greatest power sources in Gallifrey's society. In fact, using this just to track down the Doctor might put the Time Lords at risk in the Time War, just because they're using energy. And the Doctor, realises this and knows that this must be a very, very serious mission that Alistria needs for him. And he basically turns to Rejoice and is like, I'm sorry, I must confess. In another life, this could have been the start of a beautiful and great friendship, of new adventures. But it's not. The Time Lords will return you home, because at this moment in time, Time Lords cannot come to Gallifrey, even though Leela did, so who knows. And he's got to go in, they got to separate their own paths. And he apologises to Rejoice. And before Rejoice disappears, she says, you're not a monster. Remember that. You're not a monster. And Alistria comes down talking to the Doctor and is like, well, you've picked up another, I can't remember what she said, savage? No, she doesn't say savage, she says primitive. You've picked up another primitive. And the Doctor's like, yeah, she's a very sentimental, and I must be honest, I did caught up with it. But she put her heart onto a lost cause. Ending our story. And that is the Innocent. Overall, when the story is focused, and the story is focused on introducing us to the War Doctor, retroactively speaking, seeing, imagining, if it was John Hurt appearing at the start of 2005 in a Doctor era, that he's already had adventures, but this is the introduction in a way, in the same line of Rose, then this story works extremely well. It is so well written, it's so well handled in that capacity, and John Hurt doesn't know how to give a 9 out of 10 or lower performance. He is always at the top of his game, and his voice is so perfect to audio drama. You can imagine him in the War Doctor uniform saying these lines. But I feel like, and also as well, I do actually like the fact that the story itself ends halfway through, and then the rest of it is this narrative, more of like an emotional piece, and seeing the Doctor's struggles to wanting to stay here, but also his compulsion and his duty to go back into the war and fight again. And so that I actually kind of like. But most of it, there are a lot of issues with this story. Rejoice is a very weak character with very little interest of her own, only really being useful for the plot, and that's about it. I find the flashbacks very distracting and takes you out of the adventure for a sense, and it's just some problems, but overall I think this is a very great way to open the box set. It still has its flaws. It's not amazing. In terms of the mainstream, it's actually kind of split down the middle. Some people really love this and think this is the perfect way for the War Doctor to be introduced, and others find this a very weak start. And honestly, I understand both viewpoints. I'm kind of split in the middle. But in terms of my opinions on the War Doctor, I'm in the love section. I really enjoyed the story for John Hurt. But it comes with the box set, so I recommend this story if you can get it on its own. But do I recommend getting the box set? Well, we'll have to wait and see. So join me next time, where we will actually be talking about not one but 2 episodes, because technically it's a 2-parter, as the War Doctor finally encounters, from an audience point of view, the Daleks as he gets full force into the Time War and discovers a plan between the Daleks, the Time Lords, and a bunch of different planets. So join me next time for the 1,000 Worlds and the Heart of the Battle. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!